Hello and welcome to Noni, your morning chat show with topics and opinions that affect us all. Today, the horrific rise in knife attacks, what can be done to curb this growing epidemic, and which style of parenting works best, traditional or Western. We'll be hearing what you think with your tweets and calls. Joining me on today's show, Pastor Lorraine Jones, MBE. She has a very personal experience of knife crime. She lost her son Dwayne in 2014 after he was fatally stabbed close to their home in Brixton. She now campaigns to fight the senseless loss of lives in the country's capital. And Mo Real. As a comedian, she uses humour to have her say. But as a mum and a Londoner, the future of today's youth is something she takes very seriously. Knife crime is becoming a shockingly daily event in some communities. It's becoming headline news and is finally being discussed in Parliament. But is all the talk any comfort to a mother who has suffered something we hope and pray will never happen to us? Pastor Lorraine, we've met before. It's always good to talk to you. For the viewers who don't know you and don't know you about your story, tell us what happened to Dwayne.
Well, every time I have to speak about it, it's such a trauma. In 2014, Dwayne popped to the shops whilst I popped to the shops, so I literally saw him 45 minutes before the incident happened. And whilst he was out, he saw a young boy being chased by someone, and he literally went to go and help. He did help. The man had a sword, and he saved the boy from being stabbed, but he received one stab wound that went right through his heart. He was taken to King's College Hospital for 2 days. He was on a life support machine, and then he died.
It's such a shockingly awful story, and Mo, it's a story that is coming close to home. Of course, Pastor Lorraine has suffered a devastating loss. You have a teenage son. Yeah. Can you relate to the fear of mothers on the streets of London?
Yeah, I can totally relate to it, especially in certain areas. There was this time where my son was coming home from school and he called me to tell me that some kids were chasing after him with a knife. And your first thought is just give them your bag, give them whatever they want, because you want your child to be safe. And I just think that it's on a rise, and there should be stuff that's done more to help the kids have things to do so they're not, loitering or bored or whatever. And how kids are able to just be walking around with knives as well, that's unacceptable. Back in my days, they used to just fight, fist and fist, and you knew who could fight and who couldn't fight. But now people don't want to fight, they just want to stab each other. So it's serious, and I'm worried because I've got a son and I don't want him to go through any of that.
Pastor Lorraine, this might be a silly question, but of course you never thought this would happen to you, because I know we've discussed this before. Dwayne was not your favourite child. I know you have 7, but he was there for you, there for the community, there for his family. Yeah,
he was like the icing on the cake, the humour in the family, Dwayne. And even now it feels like a dream, Juliana. I feel like I'm dreaming. Dwayne was very much working in the community. He started a project which he received some funding from Lambeth for. It was a boxing and fitness project. And he started that because of the vulnerability of the young people within Angeltown and no facilities or projects for them to attend to. And, he often came home to me and would express and share the horror stories and challenges that young people were facing on the street, because he was very much like me, an outreach worker. And one evening he came home crying and he was like, "Mum, it's just so dangerous out there. I don't think I'll reach my 21st birthday." And I was like, "Oh, Dwayne, the Lord is our protection. Just focus on your project. You'll be all right." And sadly, he didn't reach his 21st birthday. But yeah, he started a project to tackle the problem of providing a space for young people to develop themselves.
Mo, you're out in the media, you're a comedian, you're on stage often. What do you think of the recent media outcry, the outrage, the sensationalist headlines surrounding knife crime?
I think that knife crime happens a lot all the time anyway. And I'm aware that the media have the power to control how the general public feel in terms of morale. So I felt that after Black Panther, which has nothing to do with this right now, but when that film came out, everybody felt a sense of togetherness, a sense of belonging. There was this amazing country, Wakanda, everybody came from it. And then all of a sudden, we all got sort of comfortable and confident, and all the black people were radiating. And then before you knew it, you had this story that was lots of stories about knife crime, which was happening before Black Panther and has been happening for years. So I felt like they pushed more of that story out. And the more we hear about it, the more we all come down on each other and we're like, what are we doing? What did the last generation do? Because it's going on for a long time. It's not news to me.
Yeah, but Pastor Lorraine, would you say, on the flip side of that, and I totally agree with what you're saying, but it's happening, isn't it? It's a fact. The media report the facts. So is it fair to give, the media and the establishment a hard time for naming and shaming predominantly black youths if this is what they're doing?
No, not at all. I mean, in all honesty, with my experience, I'm 45 years now, we have always had knife crime, but we've never in this country had this level and scale.
So it's getting worse.
It's reached a pinnacle that we have not experienced before. And that's why.
Why?
Well, it's because of the constant neglect which has been happening over the years. Cuts to services, no support for the young people whilst they're going through the challenges of emotional health, mental health, physical health, social environment, finances. It's an accumulation of a breakdown of many different aspects which, if they're not in place, they don't develop and build a young person's life. And now our young people have reached a crisis point where they're reacting in such an inhumane way where they can multiply stab one another. That hasn't happened to that scale. And it's not just black children.
Yeah.
I mean, I was somewhere yesterday and they called families from across the country, and there is a large amount, and in all fairness, English children that are being killed as well.
It's happening to everyone, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's happening to everyone. But why a knife, Mo? Okay, you grew up in poverty, your mother's working 3 jobs, your dad isn't at home, but that doesn't give you a right to carry a knife.
That describes the whole scenario of why people, if you're bored, you're going to go out. A lot of these kids, they want respect. They want so much, but they're not on a path to know how to get these things. They want money, they want girls, they want trainers, they want respect from their peers as well. Sometimes having clout, being able to put somebody else under manners, that alone gives you some sort of power. So at one point it was gun crime. I don't even know how the guns got in there, but now it's gone back to knife crime. And I just think that every generation has let the last generation down, and that might be why it's increasing.
We will continue this chat on knife crime and what can be done, if anything, to stop it. And which style of parenting works here in the UK. Is it the traditional or the Western approach? We'll be hearing your stories and experiences. More after the break. Welcome back to Noni. Still to come on today's show. Western or traditional Afro-Caribbean parenting, which works better here in the UK? But first, we return to the rise in knife crime. What drives someone to carry a knife, and can we do anything at all to change that? So, Pastor Lorraine, we were talking to you about Dwayne before the break. Clearly, if it's risen so much, there must be something that we can do to try and, decrease those numbers.
Well, in all honesty, a lot is being done, and if what is being done wasn't done, the numbers would be even worse than it is now. It's the intervention, which it's happening. It should have happened sooner rather than later, but there's a lot of intervention work going on, happening with young people as young as primary school age to secondary school and upwards. Support around their well-being, their mental health. A lot of groups, community groups, are doing astounding work engaging with young people to cope with what's happening on ground, and also outreach teams that are actually going into these neighbourhoods where there are gangs and bringing some form of peace treaty amongst gangs. So that is actively happening now.
We actually have a guest joining us who knows all too well about this. We're joined by former Borough Commander of Haringey, Dr. Victor Olisa. Dr. Olisa, the murder rate in London has jumped higher than that of New York. What's going on?
Well, clearly we're going through what appears to be another cycle of increased violence on the street and increased murder. I mean, the last time we had something very similar in the UK was probably about 11 or 12 years ago, 2008-9. I was working in Southwark then, and we saw a similar increase in the level of violence on the street, and young people being killed, and the murder weapon was predominantly knives, occasionally guns. So we're seeing that again. So, some people might say it's cyclical, but that doesn't explain the numbers. And as you just said on there, it's been quoted that for 2 months this year, the number of people murdered in the streets of London have been higher than the number of people murdered in New York City, which is a stark and a bit of a frightening statistics. And there's a whole range of things, responsible for it. I heard a little bit about the Pastor Lorraine was talking about. It's not just about policing and on the streets. There's lots of social factors that are affecting young people, and there's talks about young people being fearful of being in the street and they carry knives to protect themselves.
Okay, Dr. Alyssa, I'm just going to bring it back into the studio. Mo, you live in Brixton, and we know the place is becoming gentrified. There are coffee shops springing up everywhere. But a lot of people in the community are complaining that public spaces are just dormant now, or they're being knocked down, and you've got really nice, shiny buildings growing up.
Very, very true. Even the library, the Brixton Library, it's closed off at the moment. They were suggesting turning it into a gym. That's not going to work. It's not going to increase any productivity in terms of helping the youth, because there's no youth centres. Now there's no library. What about the kid who actually does like reading? What about those kids that are on the straight path? They're just going to be outside joining the others, loitering, chilling, looking for things to do. Before you know it, meeting other kids who you have issues with, and then before you know it, there's fights and crime and people getting stabbed, etc. The kids need that space. My kids need that space. My kids are going to do a tutoring business, and they need to do it in that space to advertise themselves and to also teach people around books.
I've got to ask about stop and search, because it's a huge topic in the community. I want to ask you quickly, Pastor Lorraine, and then throw back to Dr. Alyssa. Is that a method to stopping these stabbings? Because the black community is saying they're being unfairly targeted. But then, of course, if you look at the statistics, they are carrying knives. How can we improve the relationship between the police and young black youths?
Well, that's a topic in itself, but stop and search, yes, it is needed because the evidence is there. They are actually taking a number of knives, which I've seen myself, from young people. But one thing which Cressida Dick, which is the commissioner, has continually echoed is it's not to put an end to stop and search, but to do it in the right way. So one of the initiatives which Dynamics, which was awarded an MBE, that's our project.
Congratulations.
Thank you. One of the initiatives which we have taken to enable this to happen positively is to host stop and search workshops, and they're led by the young people, and we're seeing officers doing role play, explaining about stop and search, young people giving their views, how they feel being stopped and searched, all under the same roof, and then having conversations that can build a positive relationship with them.
That's a great point. Lastly, Dr. Alyssa, just why are these youths carrying knives?
Well, when you speak to them, they say that they use it to protect themselves, because they're afraid of being attacked, so they carry it to protect themselves. One of the things we can't ignore is that there's some young people who carry knives to use, and as a result of some of the activity they engage in, it becomes a weapon with which they can use to protect whatever it is that they see as precious and whatever it is they're trying to sell. Those groups of young people are the ones that police enforcement can be used against. The young people who don't carry the knives out of fear, and you just talked about stop and search there, one of the things that stop and search can do when it's done properly, in the right place, with respect and dignity, it can actually stop those young people who are afraid that they might be a victim, but are not involved in any criminal activity, don't like to become involved in any criminal activity. It can give them the reassurance that the police are around and they're likely to stop the people who are carrying the knives, and so we'll stop them carrying any weapons. So that's a valuable part of stop and search that we don't talk about a great deal. And I think it's an important part, but clearly the police have got to be in a position give assurance to not only young people but older people who are their parents and guardians.
Dr. Alyssa, it's been so great speaking to you on the phone. Hopefully next time you can join us live in the studio for your comments there. A really hard topic to talk about, but we made it through, ladies. Now, as an African or Caribbean, you may have many cultural ideals you stick to when living in the West, especially when it comes to parenting. In many black communities, there's that common saying, it takes a village to raise a child. It's not unheard of for everyone in the family to have a hand in discipline, but should you adapt to a more Western style? And if you do, are you raising badly behaved children or happier ones? Mo, you're quite a cool mum, you're funny. How do you strike a balance between being a parent who's of Ghanaian descent, but living in Britain and, you know, trying to be down with the cool kids?
First of all, I try not to be down with the cool kids. I just try and be myself. I sort of mix it together. I want my children to be able to express themselves. I don't want them to live in fear. I don't want them to be afraid of other people when they go out. Other adults when they go out. I want them to actually live organically within themselves and feel like they're completely worthy.
Okay, Pastor Lorraine, you know, your parents are from the West Indies, but you were born in the UK. Is it fair to say that, you know, traditional parenting is strict and, you know, it's all about abusing your children, which really that's how it's being painted out to be, where, you know, some people say, no, it's just about giving discipline and, you know, setting respect levels?
Yeah, it's more about giving discipline and setting, you know, respect levels. I mean, West Indian and African parenting is not abuse. I mean, you do have some cases where they've gone over to the extreme. But in all honesty, the Western way of upbringing your child and the laws that have been enforced, which don't marry well with, you know, us people of colour, it's brought more damage than good. I mean, we've seen a rise in children being taken into care, investigations, children being separated from their parents, even if they are returned a few months later. And as a woman of faith, a pastor in the community, I've counselled countless parents that have had their children taken away and even visited foster parents that have got children that are being fostered. And it's a terrible crisis what's happening in
It is. It's
level.
interesting you say that. I belong to a church. I've heard so many stories of, you know, parents who, you know, maybe they mismanaged a situation, social services were being involved. Mo, do you think social services are sometimes too harsh on African and Caribbean parents? You know, they come down really hard on them, but then we see so many headlines in the stories of children that have been abused and they, you know, they didn't bat an eyelid.
I want to be honest, I don't think that the UK government cared that much about the ethnic minorities to act the way they need to act when things are happening.
What do you mean?
And by that I mean you could have a family that is completely abusive to the children, and for some reason social services will take forever to come and investigate and deal with the situations.
Yeah, it's true.
And then you've got somebody who's disciplining their child, but maybe the child is wayward because different children require different ways of dealing with them. So you get some kids that are too born confident, you can't get them to calm down, you might have to give them a little tap, just so they understand when you do this, you get a tap, when you do that, you get praised, so they can understand the difference. My thing is that there are kids who should be taken and dealt with and looked after and saved from those parents, but those kids often don't. And then the ones who are not really being abused, they often get taken, and then that's why you got this weird.
You're right, but you know, Pastor Lorraine, again, you're throughout the community. There is a difference between a tap and, you know, a spanking and a beating, and of course we know that's been totally outlawed by the government. You can't hit your children, can you, or spank them?
I mean, if you're going to speak to people in my generation, the majority would say the way we were brought up with discipline, it's helped to shape us.
If we talk about, you know, we were talking about knife crime and youth violence before the break. If a traditional parent, you know, wants to instill discipline, and I'm not talking about abuse, I'm talking about, where are you? Come home, do this. Yeah. But, you know, they're fearful to do it. Does it not lead to stray children and children just saying, do you know what? I'm going out. I can come back when I want. You can't question me. It's like, you know, you tell us not to do something, but then, you know, if we don't, you get children getting up to all sorts, getting away with murder.
There's this conversation that we're supposed to have with our children. It's an open conversation. If you're not having it, the streets are going to have it with your children. Music is going to be having it with your your children. You're supposed to be the preacher in your household, and you already know from what you've been through. Like, we've all been teenagers before, we've all stood around the gangsters, and we know. So it's for you to expose it to your child. That's number one. Number two, your child should be too busy to be getting involved. Find stuff for your kids to do. My son's a dancer. Yeah, he's in the dance group. He's either doing a choreography or about to go and perform. That's it. You're not hanging out on the street unless you're going to film yourself dancing. So your kids have to be too busy to be hanging around and messing with kids that are on another vibe.
Final quick word for you, Pastor Lorraine. How do we strike the balance?
I would say get back to tradition.
Get back to tradition.
Get back to tradition.
Do you know, I think we should leave that there. It's really great talking to you, ladies. That's it from me, Juliana Olayinka, and my co-host for the morning, Mo Real, and Pastor Lorraine Jones. Don't forget, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the upcoming subjects. Join me next time for more Noni Chat. Goodbye.